Hi, and welcome everybody to another episode of the CCPA Playbook. I am super excited about, I usually say awesome like 5 million times. So I'm going to try to change it up and say super a bunch. Okay. My super awesome friend, the Bishop Justin Strickland. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Hey, thank you. It's my honor and privilege to be here.
You know, I've been looking forward to this for a while. You and I haven't really known each other for a long time. I think I say opposite ends of the universe because what generation are you of Stricklands in Citrus County?
So, to my knowledge, at least the sixth generation in Homosassa, Citrus County, Homosassa, seventh for sure in Florida. So,
Wow.
My family came from Griffin, Georgia, in the early 1800s and came to around like the Lake Weir area.
Oh, yeah.
And then kind of branched off from there. And so my whatever I would say great grandfather, Henry Clay, actually came here in the 1850s into Citrus County and settled right there.
So does Griffin, Georgia look a lot like Homosassa, Florida?
No, it's a lot more clay.
A lot more clay.
Yeah. So funny story. So we actually went to Griffin, Georgia to see my, I can't even tell you how many distant relative, but it's my direct ancestor. He's a Revolutionary War veteran, and he's buried right there in Griffin, Georgia. And you had me and my family, my wife and 3 kids, and we got pictures right there in Griffin, Georgia, right up against Solomon Strickland's headstone. Is the craziest little thing. It's off the side of this dirt road. I mean clay road, yeah. Right? And you're going far. We traveled for 30 minutes down these back roads, and I'm like, there's no way, And then all of a sudden, right on the side of the road, I think I found it on like findagrave.com or whatever, and there's this little family cemetery that's all from late 1700s, early 1800s, mid 1700s even, right there on the side of this clay road. And
it's funny that there are cemeteries all over this country that just people don't know where they're at, right? Nancy and I got married in Santa Fe, so just north of Gainesville. And it's at a place called Santa Fe River Ranch. Super awesome place. Definitely agritourism. But I say that because when you go out there, again, you're taking a bunch of back roads to get to this ranch. And then right before you get to the gate is a little family cemetery area. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, Nancy, I don't know if this is a good omen that we're about to get married here, but we're passing this cemetery every day. But so you're 5th, 6th generation Citrus Countyan.
Definitely 6.
And I always it's kind of an interesting fact that I didn't know one person in Citrus County prior to May of 2009. Nobody really knows that because we do a lot. Nancy and I are out in the community a lot. Now she grew up here. Nancy grew up here. Her family came down from Jersey when her dad retired from the police department up in Jersey. But me, I didn't know anybody. Right. So that's why I love talking to you because of your history. So why don't you tell everybody what you do?
Well, so vocationally, I guess you would say I'm the executive pastor of Crystal River Church of God, and I've been there full time. This has been my church for almost 17 years, actually. Nope, it is 17 years. June 6th. June 6th was 17 years. And so I been on staff since April of 2019. And so interesting, I come on staff as the executive pastor. Previous executive pastor is he's a pastor in the county, lead pastor. And he had just transitioned into lead pastor and kind of took this church that was a historical church in the community of Inverness, and just, he took on it. I wouldn't say it was it was somewhat in decline as far as attendance and so on, and he just revamped it and went from there. And then I took on the position right after him. Come from business background, mechanical background. I was a mechanic for a Mercury mechanic and outboards for 12 years, had my own business for, I would say, probably about in total 5-7 years in addition to that, and then was in business with Dr. Desai, and then ended up going full time at Crystal River in 2019, and just in time for COVID. So,
that's a good way to cut your teeth. I remember one time you and I were traveling around Homosassa, meeting a bunch of different folks. And I'll just say we met with, I'll just say 15 people or 15 groups of people that day. And out of the 15 groups of people, 10 of them said, this is the best motor mechanic I know. 10 out of 15 said that. Like, it was crazy.
They, and I still get phone calls, and I have not, man. I mean, I turn wrenches on my own stuff. Now what I do for turning wrenches is for fun, for hobby, right? But I turn wrenches. I have not turned wrenches professionally since probably 2017. With one exception, I have this deal worked out with my dentist where I work on his boat and then he works on our teeth.
Well, so, you've got a whole slew of kids, so that's probably a good payoff.
It works pretty well.
And you just said you just turned 300,000 miles on your truck, so I'm sure you're still working on that thing.
Yeah, it does me pretty well, but just the stuff to keep it rolling.
Wait, is that like, that's like totally Homosassa? Like, hey, I need you to work on my teeth and I'll work on your boat motor.
Yeah, no, that's not necessarily Homosassa.
Oh, that's everywhere. It kind of reminds me of, if anybody, most times Nancy and Savannah will call because they'll call me if they need something because they know that I know a guy.
Yeah,
and you're one of those guys, right? Yeah. Like if somebody needs something, they're going to call Justin because Justin probably knows a guy.
So, funny story. Yeah. I would say that developed across the various different places that I've been involved with. Old Homosassa was where I was a mechanic for the majority of the time working down there. And those guys, man, that is one of the most loyal places on the planet.
Sure.
I
agree.
It's one of those things where, if they buy their trucks from you, they only buy their trucks from you. If they buy their cars from, their outboards, they only buy them from you. They don't take them anywhere else. They don't even, think about it. And so, and what's funny is that's not only just like the locals that have been there forever, that's in their DNA, but you find that even some of the people that move in from across the country or from other places in the state who now call Old Homosassa their home, they almost adopt the culture and the lifestyle. And I don't know whether it's because, you have to be like that to get in there, or whether that's just what you develop over time, but they are very loyal. So what happens is you become one of almost their family,
sure,
if that makes sense. And so you just know all of these people. And one of the things I would say too is what we did. I worked for a guy by the name of Skip Turberville. He's retired now, finally, after I don't even know, 40 plus years of turning wrenches. It's just a very bright mind, specifically in his trade. The guy just, he was incredible. And so I had the privilege, people say things like that, best Mercury mechanic around, all that stuff. I'm a product of what I was able to experience and who I had mentor me. And this guy he was almost an artist with the trade, right? And so he developed a name within the community and beyond the community where people would come there because they knew that it would be done when he said it was done. That's the first thing. You couldn't just drop off your boat. You got on the schedule, which a lot of these other places, and not just boat mechanics, but also just mechanics in general. Sure. You can just go roll it in there, drop it off, and they say, okay, we'll get to it when we get to it. Skip didn't work that way. Skip was, no, if I tell you it's going to be done this day, it's going to be done this day, but you bring it on that day. I'll make sure I have the parts. I'll make sure I have everything I need. And he had developed that skill over years where people just trusted him. And that then brought out to where good people find good people, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So if you're one of those people that you want things done right and you want it done with a particular set of skills, but also craftsmanship, you're going to find people that have that same kind of mentality. And so what would happen is then this network of people began, where we had a network of people that, would come to us, but we would also have them as, someone that we could go to. So, and then, so that gave me a huge pool of people that I had access to, um, just great minds, whether they were mechanics, whether they were electricians, whether they were builders, whether they were, businessmen, whatever the case is. I had those people who just were craftsmen in their trade or business, whatever the case is. And then also, it doesn't hurt that, everybody in the county, knew my dad, and
Big country.
big country.
Big country.
And so you have that where everywhere we would go, my wife makes the joke where I can't go into Walmart without being in there for an hour, because of people that I know. So yes, I'd say I know somebody for everything, right? But that's all because of the experiences that I've had growing up that I was just afforded to be able to be in the middle of,
Yeah. So there's a bunch that I loved what you just said there. One of them where people move in from the outside and they just become welcomed as a family. I think that's Citrus County as a whole. But I can give you a specific story about Homosassa. In my 4.5 years, I've done I've been invited to do a lot of speaking engagements, HOAs, Rotaries, everything. It doesn't matter what it is, just everything. And recently I got invited to the Homosassa River Alliance that meets, I can't remember what night it was, like Thursday nights at 7. And normally all my speaking stuff is during the day.
Right.
And so this one was at night. And I'm like, who's going to come to the Homosassa River Alliance at night to hear the property appraiser talk? And so I go, and the parking lot is just slammed packed.
Yeah.
And they care about their community. And I will tell you, I walk in, they greet me, smiles, everybody's welcoming, and people are starting to kind of flood in, and they're like, hey, we made some special snacks because we knew you were coming tonight. And I'm telling you, Justin, it was a spread of desserts, cookies, and I love cookies. And so if I had to guess, I don't know, there was over 50 people.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have a lot of crazy important stuff to talk about, but it was important to them. And when I asked the gentleman, I said, is this a normal meeting size for you guys? And they're like, well, normally there's like 100 people here. And I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've gone to any group outside of the chamber luncheon that I spoke to at a couple years ago. That's loaded. But it was 50 people. They were engaged. They asked great questions. And you want to talk about feeling like I was welcome into the Homosassa community. And I'm not from Homosassa, so obviously. And it was just a very heartwarming time.
Right.
And I spent I don't even remember too. I don't wear watches because I just we just go, right? And being in the moment. And they were awesome, and they want me back. They invited me to come back, and it was genuine.
Right.
It was genuine, and so it was awesome, and I loved it. The second thing that you talked about right there was, so you're talking about a boat mechanic, which is obviously in Citrus County a big deal.
Right.
I mean, it's a huge deal. But it's the customer service expectation that he had, the standard that he set for himself. And
I'll tell you a phrase he said. This is a phrase that has stuck with me, and he was a person, I speak like he's not, he's living and actively living in Citrus County, and he and his wife travel.
I'm sure he appreciates you clearing that up.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
He's going to start getting phone calls.
Yeah. But he was a person who wasn't incredibly easy to work for. What I mean by that is he he expected the same level of excellence out of his employees. That
accountability.
Right, exactly. But he would have this saying, and the saying stuck with me through everything I've done. He said, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, you certainly do not have time to do it right the second time. So just do it right the first time.
Yeah, it's so true. I think that we have that accountability for our customer service too, because we have an expectation that we set in the community that we're going to serve with excellence, right? And excellence is hard. That's a hard standard to set. But I feel like if we set that bar high, even if we come close, we're doing pretty good.
Right.
We're doing pretty good. And I always tell our citizens of Citrus County, like, I want to know if one of the employees of the Citrus County Property Appraiser's Office treats you unfairly or doesn't treat you well, I want to know about it.
Right.
Never happens because our staff is awesome. But I mean, I want to know, right? And so for that gentleman to run a business that way. So my wife and I just, Nancy and I just went to Sarasota. We went and stayed at the beach for a couple of days to get away. And I will tell you, the customer service at that hotel, through the roof.
Really?
They were amazing. They actually stepped up their game. I can tell you, we go and we travel a bunch, and this specific hotel has your phone number, and they're constantly, I say constantly, periodically they're checking on you. Hey, do you need anything?
Right.
And you don't need to call. So like, we needed an extra blanket, and so you text it, hey, can I get a blanket? And that's all you have to say. And literally within 5 minutes, blankets at your door. And so they were awesome. I mean, everybody from, just everybody, cleaning people. It was cool. So customer service needs to be the number one priority. And I'm sure, I know that's the way it is here. I'm sure that's how it is at your church.
100%. I mean, we do, number one is, what do they say? The first, and I don't want to butcher it, but I probably will. They say the first interaction is the interaction that they hold their entire view of you on, right?
Right.
The first moment they meet you. What helped me with that was I worked for Publix whenever I was in high school.
That's like the common theme here in Citrus County. It's like when you're growing up in Citrus County, at some point you worked in Publix, or somebody in your family worked in Publix.
Yeah, I always held this, they said there was this, when I was in high school, there was this like statistic where they found out that most millionaires, right, at that time, self-made millionaires, worked at Publix at one particular time and drove an F-150.
Oh.
So,
okay. I did it wrong. I went to Winn-Dixie. I worked at Winn-Dixie, and I have an F-150.
Well, I'm sorry.
I'm not going to be a millionaire.
So anyway, I had stuck with that, and as a young teenager, you think, okay, and I had an F-250 actually at the time, but F-150.
You figure why take the risk with an F-150? You get a 250, you double your chances.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly what I was thinking. So anyways, I went to work for Publix 15. And which was kind of an odd thing. They didn't hire 15-year-olds because of the child labor law with regards to 15-year-olds.
Winn-Dixie will.
Well, that makes sense.
I'm just
anyways, there was a whole big thing over that too. But I actually kind of hoodwinked the general manager. What I did was I found out he was this big country boy redneck, right? So I put on cowboy boots, my finest Wranglers, my big belt buckle.
Did you starch them?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I had this Tough Hedeman. Anybody knows Tough Hedeman?
Yeah.
Tough Hedeman, PBR rodeo Wrangler, nice shirt, and I'm dressed up. And so I walk in there at 15 years of age, right? And I didn't know there was no rule 15-year-olds could apply. I just applied, whatever. So I walked in there. I remember my dad said, "You're getting a job, and you're getting a job at Publix." And so he just, brought me in there and made me fill out an application. So I go upstairs, and Mickey McPhee was his name. He was my first general manager. He looks at me. He says, "Well, son, you look like you're going to a rodeo." I said, "The only place I'd rather be than a rodeo is right here, sir." And he said, "Okay." And, we went through this whole thing. But Publix taught me so much about customer service. And generally speaking was, if you make eye contact with a person, address them, right? If a person is within 10 feet of your personal space, you should be addressing them. So if you're not making eye contact, if they're within 10 feet, hey, can I help you find something? And so we have at our church, and I would say it predates me even, because Pastor Ronnie very much, which is the lead pastor for those that don't know, he's for one, he's a phenomenal leader, but two, he has a customer service background as well. And he is one of those guys that he's out in the foyer shaking hands, asking how everybody's doing, that kind of stuff. He's just a great guy. And so he kind of set the bar with our greeters, and we call them our first impressions team because they are the first impression that people will get. And with our greeters, our ushers, and so on. And so we get on a regular basis, we get compliments over, like you'll see on like Google reviews or whatever, they'll say they have first class greeters or whatever the case is, you know. And, you know, we're making sure that we're trying to identify first time guests, and we want to make sure they leave there with something. So
there's Google reviews on churches.
Oh, 100%.
Wow. I figured that would be a double-edged sword.
Can be.
I don't know if I want to upset Jesus by giving you a bad review.
Yeah, well, they do.
We were on the 10-foot rule. It was funny. So I meet Nancy 10 years ago in Savannah, and they're introverts. And so when they go to Publix, they go in, get their stuff, they leave. Me, kind of like you when in your story with Walmart, like it takes you forever to get through Walmart, right? Well, if I'm walking down, if we park the car and we're walking to the front door and I pass by somebody, I'm saying good morning.
Right.
I got to say good morning. Or if this elderly person is done with their buggy, ma'am, or sir, can I take your buggy? And then we have a little conversation. It's like little mini relationships, you know, they're friendships. And so Nancy and Savannah, they just keep walking, and not that they're mean people or horrible people. They're just introverts. They just don't feel the need to do that. And so my dad, who is from Lake County, I'm from Lake County. He was over one time, and we took him to Publix for some reason, and Savannah was with us. And this was actually just a couple years ago. And so my dad and I are walking, and Savannah's next to us. And mind you, she's probably 17 or 18 at the time. So 4 or 5 years ago. And my dad did the exact same thing. And she goes, oh my goodness, you guys are the same person. And I'm like, no, that's just the right thing to do. But for an introvert or for an extrovert, it's easy. Right. Because we thrive off of that kind of stuff. So it's always fun to have the conversations about introvert versus extrovert, you know, but.
And I mean, I can have, you know, you talk about like on a Sunday morning, you know, I see 1,000 people on a Sunday morning, you know, whether it's, you know, I'm just visually seeing or actually having a conversation with them or whatever. And so come Sunday afternoon, I'm just ready to like be in a dark dungeon and, you know, just chill.
So even as an extrovert, it still wears you out.
Oh yeah. I mean, because it's energy. Yeah. And so something that I think about is like when I was a mechanic or whatever the case is, I kind of knew who my customers were, right? They made sense. So if I saw my customer, hey, how are you doing? People that I knew, that base, I guess you would say, is a lot smaller, smaller niche. When I became a pastor, you know, even though I had the business background where, you know, we were seeing hundreds of people a day, you know, from all different, but they were all from across the world. So the idea of you seeing them in Publix or Walmart or whatever the case is was very rare. When I became a pastor, I had to realize that this is that you will be seeing people who know you, but you don't know them. And that was really a new thing for me because I was pretty good with recognizing people that I knew and just having that relationship. But when it got to be where, you know, our church is running, you know, 1,000 people before then, but I'm just saying that's where we're at now. But I mean, when we were running 650, whatever, I had to start to realize that there are people that are coming through there that know me, but I don't know them. And, you know, and it's not that I would be, you know, intentionally trying to ignore anybody at all. It's just sometimes, you know, I can be task oriented,
right?
You know, if I need to be. And I think that's the executive pastor side of me, right? Business side, but where I know what I need to do, go in there. But to realize that people count more than the task, you know, is something that even people who are in the business have to remind themselves every once in a while. And I can imagine in your case where everyone is your customer. If you're a taxpayer, you know, if you're a property owner, rather, in Citrus County, everyone is your customer.
And and the problem, I say the issue is not everybody who is a property owner in Citrus County lives in Citrus County. And so, like, I'll just use an example. The representatives from Duke are out of Charlotte.
Right.
And so, we have many property owners from around the world. And so you only have brief interactions with them. And so a lot of people know, our staff know, like, if I'm out in public and they're with me, and somebody says, "Hey, Craig, what's going on?" And usually if I don't say my name or I don't introduce, because I'm really good about introducing people, but if I don't know their name within like 5 seconds, they know I probably don't know their name. And they introduce themselves. "Hey, I'm Rosa," or "Hey, I'm Dan," or "Hey, I'm Darren." And then they'll say their name, and then, like a light bulb goes off. Nancy is on cue with it too.
Yeah.
And usually if I say, "Hey, buddy," I don't know their name.
Me too.
I don't know their name. And but 160,000 people, man, it's hard.
Ronnie Reed it is the absolute best that I've ever seen. And not that he remembers names, because he doesn't, but he'll say, "I'm sorry, have we met before? I apologize. I am."
Well, he's very soft spoken too, so he could probably get away with that
sometimes.
Yeah.
But you know what it is about him that I just love is he's incredibly honest. And what I mean by that is even the stuff that sometimes we think are good manners, but we're just being polite or we don't want to offend anybody. He sees a different point of view on that. Is that, no, I want them to know that I'm honest, that I'm trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
So he just tells them the truth. "I'm so sorry. I should probably know your name, but I do not. Will you help me know your name?" And he says, "No, I'll probably have to ask you a couple more times." He just comes out and says it.
That's great. That's a great way to do it.
Instead of somebody like me who's sometimes the thing I do is, I'll say, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?"
Nancy knows if I say the word buddy, I don't know their name.
Yeah.
It's a trigger. But I will tell you, I had a canine officer when I was a patrol sergeant, and he's gone on to be a patrol sergeant now, named TJ Endorado.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a photographic memory.
Yeah.
And he knows everybody. It is actually it actually makes me sick, because I wish I could do that.
Right.
But he was amazing at names. So usually if I went places as a patrol sergeant, he went with it, especially with the bad guys. He would know the bad guys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
But he was super good at that. So it's funny, you actually use the word relational. And I'm just curious of your take on this as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
because we never even got into the rest of the stuff you do. You're on the library board, chairman of the library board, right, which I want to get into a little bit. Okay. You're also on the board with me on for Youth Leadership Citrus. Yeah. There's, for those that don't know, there's a Leadership Citrus and there's a Youth Leadership Citrus. Leadership Citrus is run by the chamber, and Youth Leadership Citrus is really run by the Y.
Right. It's a partnership between the chamber and the Y, but the Y takes the lead on it.
And you and I have vested interest in the youth of Citrus County. 100%. And so I want to dive into that. But in the different roles, you don't own any other businesses, right? You've sold them. You sold your partner, got out of those.
I somewhat divested myself of those in November of 23.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, Desai and I very much still friends, call each other. He's awesome. But I just went to him. I said, "Dr. Desai," and this actually happened months before. I said, I can't do what I'm doing, and be a good father, a good husband.
Yeah. Because you have how many kids, Justin?
3.
3 kids. And how long have you been married? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Years.
Okay.
Oh, no.
As soon as I was about to say that, I'm like, should I say this? I don't know. But
yeah.
All right, so 15
no,
years.
I'm pretty good with that stuff, May 29th, 15
Oh, okay.
years.
You just had it.
Yep.
You just had it.
Yeah.
So where I was going with that is, so professionally, leadership, personally, I see a lot of leaders where they go wrong, or where people in general go wrong, and really leadership. I really kind of want to lean into the leadership part of this, but I see a lot of leadership that try to be more transactional.
Yeah.
And I have issue with that, right? I wish they would be more relational. And you used that word a few minutes ago in your story that you were telling. And I think having good, solid relations is way more impactful than transactional. But in leadership, and not just government, not just nonprofit, not just for profit, but a lot of leaders where they go wrong, I believe, is when they're trying to be transactional, and
100%.
that's bad. And what's your take on that?
So first of all, I look at it like this. I think back on all the people that have been the most impactful in my life, and for the majority, I realize that the impact is always attached to the relationship. I see where they were more so not just relational leaders, but also in some parts transformational leaders, right? Not
Great
transactional.
word.
Transactional is, hey, you get a paycheck and you do the job, and I tell you what to do. Which, sometimes I guess there's places and seasons in life. I'll use a pastor word. We use seasons a lot, right? There are seasons in life where that may be necessary, or might, that, hey, this is just the way it is. The expectations are clear. It's whatever. But relational and transformational, and I would even say that, that is not something that, you know, I feel like people may think that that's something that comes easy to me, but that's not, excuse me, something that comes easy to me at all. That's something that I've had to work on, is that, is make sure that I'm not losing relationship in the minutia, right? Is that it's more important that people feel like they can trust me, and not only trust me, that I have their best interests at heart, even though I may have to have a difficult conversation with them. Because, as leaders or employers, whatever, um, there are many times you have to have difficult conversations, and I don't think anybody likes that. I've heard people say, well, they like confrontation. I think they're used to it. I don't think
Right.
they like it. Um, Confrontation is not easy, but learning how you can correct without losing the relationship, that's important. And I've had the privilege of, not all the employers or leaders, mentors in my life have been good at correction, but I've had good leaders who have been. And Ronnie Reed is one of the best. My father is one of the best. You could always tell that, my father was very stern, strict man growing up, and even at that, you always saw his heart in the thing. And I mean, my father would, discipline us and then go in the room and cry about it.
Yeah.
I mean, and anybody that knows my dad, he's this tough man's man of a man, because it hurt him to have to do that. And I think, if you're just leading because you want to be seen, because you want people to follow you, your why is mixed up. You know, Leaders are interested in elevating the whole body.
Like a holistic approach.
True leaders,
Yeah.
right? They it should be, I want to see everybody elevated. Some are not going to meet my level. They're just not. And that might mean that they may have to go to other, I'll use the term, you want to elevate the whole harbor. Well, they might have to go to a different port. But I want them to be elevated in some way or shape or form while they are here. And then maybe someone else can pour into them and give them that other little niche that they need, that whatever I wasn't able to meet. But, I don't want to ever leave somebody worse off than they were when they came, you know, because you're talking about not only people, but you're talking about generations, right? Especially if they have children. If they have one bad experience, what does that do to the family that now is just repeated in generation after generation after generation? I don't know. Maybe I look too far into things, but I just feel like stuff is just too important.
I can tell you, well, there's a couple things there. I will tell you, when we're about to do some interviews for some vacant spots that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And then here recently, we've also had to let go of an employee or two. And I always tell our senior staff and the leadership that's in charge of both those sides, right? Whether it be hiring or whether it be terminating employee, you are about to change that person's life forever.
100%.
Their story, their book, their journey, everything is about to be affected by the decision we're about to make, and we better not be making, whether it's hiring or terminating it, that decision needs to be thought through, and that's extremely important. And I agree with you, because we could all look back and be like, man, if I would have just done this, I wouldn't be here. You can't do that, right? You can't live in the past, and we don't worry about that. But one of the things you use the word, and Jay Miller and I talked about, there's two things. Let me kind of go sidebar. You talk about, the holistic approach, right? And it's very transformational. Jay Miller, Coach Miller, who was on one of our other podcasts, talked about, so he's a collegiate softball coach, super awesome guy. And he talks about, he cares more if somebody's going to go to his college to play softball. He's going to be worried more about the person, the student, the family, their mental. And he goes, the winning a softball game is actually just a byproduct,
right?
Because it's like all these other pillars are more important and always will be than the actual winning itself, and that's a big deal. And so I agree with that here. I totally agree with that, and I'm sure that's going to be something that you could talk about. But like, I care about the holistic approach to training or teaching or leading our staff here, because that's what I care about. The number one thing we have to do is certify a tax roll, which is going on right now. It's the number one thing, so everybody can do their budgets, and that's such a huge deal. But if I have the right culture and we have the right person and I'm vested in their growth, then the tax roll will be fine. I never have to worry about that.
That's secondary.
So secondary. But I would tell you, you said the word why. And I love Simon Sinek. I don't know if you ever listen to him. What is Justin Strickland's why? You could have probably made that $1 million because you worked at Publix and own an F-250 working on motor engines, boats and stuff. But you decided to get into being a bishop, on the library board, on youth leadership, Citrus. What is Justin Strickland's why for that?
Well, I think that's so. You talk about all of that. I could have. Dr. Desai offered me to go full time with them too. Because he said, yeah, I understand how that's all a lot, and I said I couldn't. And his question was, the first question, he said, now of course you understand he comes from a different background, and that clerics in the Hindu world are some of the richest people in their culture, right?
Monetarily.
Okay. Because a lot of you go to the temple, whatever they call it, and you pay for the prayer, right? Well, obviously in Christianity that's not the case, right? And he said, "Do they pay you that much more money? I will match it, and you keep what you got, that kind of thing." And I said, Dr. Josiah, no, pastors do not make that kind of money, And I said, and here's something. This guy is, another one of those just transformational leaders in the community and so on. He's almost
quiet at it.
Very much so. Yeah. He's 78 years old, or 77, I would imagine 78 at this point now, but 78 years old, still practicing surgery and good at it. Not like, practicing as in.
And building a hotel.
And multiple hotels. and I asked him, or I said this, I turned this on him. I said, Dr. Desai, you don't have to do surgery. You have so much money, you never have to ever touch a scalpel again. But you do it, why? He said, well, because I want to help people. I said, exactly. And so my why is, there was a point in my young life, I guess, where I got focused on the me, right? And yes, I want this, I want this, I want this. Why? Because, you work hard. That was instilled by my dad and my grandfathers and mother and so on. they were very much, my mother was like, you're going to school, you're going to do your very best. My dad was like, you're cutting the grass, whether you like it or not, get out there. And if it isn't to my standards, you're going to do it again, and that's just those kind of things. So it created inside of me this thing of like, well, I got to work, I got to make, I got to make a decent amount of money. I want to make sure I have a nice truck that is dependable, and so everything was very much, a little bit selfish, right? To where you're focusing more on yourself and the needs that need to be met with yourself. Well, then you get married, right? And then once you get married, your needs now become different, and they become more focused on your spouse. And then we start having children, and now it becomes more of a family-based focus. And then I realized that even in that, and don't get me wrong, I'm very much, my family's number one. If I can't lead my family, I don't have the credibility to lead anyone else. So
I'm gonna pause you there. I think if anybody has listened to any of my other podcasts, or anybody hears any of my leadership talks, and I do them all over the country, one of the things I always say in every single one, and I've said in almost every podcast, if you can't lead a home, you can't lead a work.
100%.
Yeah. So I'm glad you just said that, because it's almost like affirmation that what I'm saying is legit.
100%.
Yeah.
And so then you start to realize that, okay, and I have this mindset. I remember I was involved, but one of the main organizations that I got involved with was the Civil Air Patrol. And so, incidentally, I'm still a second lieutenant in the Civil Air Patrol, United States.
Did not know that. Yeah. That's a fun fact.
But I have not been to a meeting in a very long time. However,
was that a little self-reflection right there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, and I just started pouring into these young, I've always been involved in youth, I think. And so that why became more about the next generation, and so the Civil Air Patrol was a cadet-led squadron, that particular squadron that I was a part of. Not all of them are not, but cadet-led squadron just basically means that the teens lead the squadron, and you kind of sit back as a mentor. I was the character development officer and the finance officer. Excuse me. So you just kind of oversee all of that. My point was dealing with the CFRs and all of the stuff that, the regulations, different things that we had to do, but you let the cadets do it. But in implementing all of that with them, doing that. And then I started to realize, and I said, well, I have kids, but something came to me is that if you pour into this child, you pour into this young man, because they may not have the home life that you were blessed to have. They may not have the experiences that you were blessed to have, but if you can put into them some kind of information that not only changes their life, but it changes their family's lives for generations, right? Then someone will also pour into your child. My son right now is at a youth camp that we host at the church right now. I just dropped him off on my way over here, right? And he is being poured into by other men and women that are just helping. And so it's kind of like, I believe that this life is a lot bigger. Obviously, I believe it's a lot bigger than just the here and the now. This is not only do I believe in the afterlife, but also that there are generations that are coming one after another. And even in this community, this county, whatever, if we can start to make a difference now, I don't know, I may never see the difference that I made, but my kids might, or their kids might. And so having this long-term approach, that is my why, is I want to see, I grew up in old Homosassa, and those are my people, right? And I saw growing up my cousins and family members who, they didn't necessarily have the same family home life that I did. And I saw how they ended up in, some of them, not all of them. There are many good ones down in old Homosassa. I think sometimes people forget that place does create some great people, but just become addicted. And, you see where they they bounce around from, different substances and in and out of jail and so on. And it hurts me, because I know that the reason why I didn't have that experience is because of my parents, And so if I can speak into the lives of these young men and women, And, like in youth leadership citrus, the majority of them kids are the IB kids, and they're brilliant, So they have, we would suspect, better home lives, but some of them may not. And we've been there and we've seen the ones that we know they don't. And somehow they got into this program. Somehow they got there. And if I can just be a part in helping them change their mentality, maybe that they already have, like they know they want something different, but they don't know what different looks like. If I can be a part in that and help them so that their life doesn't have to be like that, man, that affects generations.
Sure.
You want to change the poverty level in this county, and I'm a part of that initiative with the chamber, is helping out with that. Is the chamber has this initiative where they want to cut the poverty rate in half by 2030. Which, full disclosure, I think that's like a lofty goal, right? But my point is we just start with a little stuff and start making all these little things and change the mentality. The poverty level will get better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that a lot of our young people, and I think a lot of people were maybe trying to get out of addiction.
Right.
Not that I can relate to the addiction that some people are going through, because I will never relate to that. My point is this: I spoke at Summer Rise last year, which is almost similar. It's the same kids that are going, a lot of the same kids that are going to Youth Leadership Citrus. But my conversation with them last year, there was probably 300 kids in that room. And I said, the only reason I'm at where I'm at today is because of my failures.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was able to learn from them. I think a lot of kids put so much stress and pressure on themselves. Same thing with adults. And I think that they need people to tell them, you know what, it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
It's okay to fail. And so I think one of the questions that I'd love for you to answer as a leader, as a young person, just a community leader, and as a father and husband, I mean, what lessons have you learned from your failures? But I'm gonna say this. I was gonna wait till the end because I was trying to have this big wow moment, but you kind of walked into it, right?
Yeah.
So Nancy and I are at the beach this weekend, and I like imperfect people.
Right.
I love them because we can all learn from them. I'm imperfect. I'm one of the biggest imperfect people.
I'm attracted to them.
Yeah.
Not like in a.
So I'm walking down the beach, and I know that our listeners are never going to be able to see this, so I hope you watch the YouTube video. But I see this shell, and I'm like, man, this thing is awesome. Actually, there's sand. There's beach in there, but this shell is perfect, right? There's a lot of sand in there. But this thing is like, it is beautiful, and it's smooth, and you could just tell like it had a good life.
Yeah.
And then I walk like 50 feet, and then I come across this one, and it is just the carcass of the same shell, but it's broken. It's got a lot of tough ridges. It's got holes. It's got cracks. You can see through it.
Yeah.
And I love this one. This one to me is a better. Yeah. I love stories.
Yeah.
I love stories. And I remember being a cop, and I'd drive around in neighborhoods and be like, every house has a story. Every employee has a story. But I like this person, right? I want to be around this person because the people who think they're this probably are not this.
Man, I am most comfortable around people who just let it show. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. And so this is me. I think this is a better version of me. And I have a lot of lessons, failures. I have a lot of lessons in my failures. And that's what I love talking to groups about and to leaders about and to kids about. So that's my question to you. Like, what do you think some of your biggest lessons and your failures have been? Well, that you like to pass on as I wipe the beach sand off the couch here.
So funny thing, I'm a nerd at heart, and we went to NASA with my son's 5th grade.
I didn't know where you were going with that.
Yeah,
I'm not a nerd yet, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I'm a dummy.
Yeah, I'm just geeky, right?
Okay.
And so I love NASA. I love technology. I love all that stuff. Which I'm clearly a big redneck.
So I think we talked about this at the beginning or before we started airing, but like you're the most American person I know. And you just keep solidifying it. Like you love NASA.
I am hook, line, and sinker.
So American. That's why I'm wearing red, white, and blue for you today. I'm pretty American too. One of the questions is, I don't even know where it's at. Oh, it's over there in my cabinet. We'll get to it. I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But keep going. So you're at NASA.
We're there 5th grade, NASA trip with my oldest Wyatt, and so we're walking around.
How old is he?
Wyatt is 13.
13.
Yeah, and dude, almost as tall as me. It's wild. Just he's a great kid. He's stubborn. I don't know where he gets that from, but he's just a great kid. And so we're walking around doing all that. And we go into the gift shop, and I see, I love coffee. I'm a coffee fanatic, right? I could drink coffee all day long. I'm just that kind of guy, right?
I drank a Diet Coke yesterday at 1 p.m. and didn't go to sleep till midnight last night.
No joke.
I can't do what you do.
Well, yeah, I don't know what to tell you about that, buddy.
It's my failure.
Yeah, one day that might happen to me. I don't know. I'll call it.
I am way older than you.
Not way, but yeah, clearly older, but not way older.
Clearly, how's it clearly?
Yeah,
you have a mullet. For those that can't see, he is Homosassa.
You could do this.
No, I could.
It'd be a skull.
Yeah, it'd be wrapped around the side and to the back.
Like Hulk Hogan,
Yeah.
Anyways,
we digress.
So, anyways, I walk into this gift shop, which is incredible, right? They got all kinds of things in there, and me and my kids are all very much like geeky like that. We're all into animals and science and all that stuff. So I walk up, there's coffee mugs, and I see this coffee mug, and it says failure is not an option, which I understand the context of it, right? Failure is not an option. That if you're going to the moon, it better not be an option, right? But even at that, if we look back, they had plenty of failures that they learned from, right? Yeah. So failure in the sense of we will accomplish our goal is not an option, but or that we will not accomplish our goal rather is not an option. But you're going to have all these little failures in the process. So what was funny is I have this coffee mug. It's absolutely my favorite coffee mug. My second favorite coffee mug is another coffee mug that Pastor Anthony, one of our youth pastors, got me. He said, when all else fails, ask Justin. That's what it said. He got it from
very smart
somewhere. And anyway, so I'll get that, and drink it every once in a while. But that coffee mug I love. And so I remember I had set the coffee mug up on the hood of my truck, and, I'm getting ready, getting the kids out ready, because I drop the kids off at school. Danielle picks them up. It's kind of my time with them in the morning where we're talking. They ask me a million questions, right? And it's just time for Dad to just download, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm backing out of the driveway, and I had forgot to grab my coffee mug and set it in the truck, right? And I'm watching this failure is not an option coffee mug, literally, and the words are right in front of me, and it goes like this and rolls off the hood of my truck and dumps out. And I walk outside and I pick it up, and I literally said this to myself. I said, but sometimes it is.
Did it break?
No.
Wow.
It did not break.
Boy, there's some grace there.
That is the truth. And, in that same coffee mug, probably 2 weeks later, I end up dumping the whole cup of coffee on my lap in the truck, and I'm sitting, then I have to go to the car wash and sitting there, try to shampoo out of my seats. Right. So, failure is not an option, but okay, in the long run, but failure in the middle is how we learn. And, some of my small failures were, I grew up with parents who told me, that you're bright, you can do all things. They were constantly positive affirmation, that kind of stuff. Well, which is great, and I do that very much with my children. But sometimes what comes out of that is arrogance, right? And if there's been anything that has gotten me in more trouble in my life, it's been arrogance in certain places, and I remember I made a statement one time, because up until that point I had built power heads. Power heads are the engine component of an outboard motor, right? And so I would rebuild power heads one after another, and they would just hold up because I would take my time, and I had gotten to where I'd put my name stamp in the side of the power head, right, and the number that it was, because I had gotten to this place where I had 0 failures, right, in the power heads, and I had kind of had so much pride in that, right, that I'm just doing a good job, because my boss was very much, hey, we do it right, and then I remember there was this one particular power head that I built for a guy by the name of Brian Coleman.
Oh,
do you remember Brian Coleman?
Yep.
Great guy. And, we put it all together, did everything. And I thought everything was great. Well, he goes out, first time he takes it out, the thing blows up. Now, mind you, this guy is not only a good guy in the community, he also works with my dad.
Sheriff's office.
He's trusted us, and I have just failed him. And I remember being so defeated, like, what did I do to do this? Like, there's no way. This just doesn't happen. I can't mess up, right? And what happened was, and this would be Spanish or Greek the most, but there's bleed lines on 2-cycle engines, and those bleed lines have to wrap around, and they basically take care of all of the unspent fuel in a cylinder, right? And I had the bleed lines too long and didn't route them the same original way they were supposed to. I routed them in a area that made more cosmetic sense, right? And it hung open the throttle body of the engine, which made the engine go to wide open throttle immediately, and he's able to snatch it back into neutral. Now,
I'm surprised Brian appreciated that.
Oh no,
County Commissioner Brian Coleman.
Honestly, he was very graceful and understanding. We took care of it, of course, but he was very understanding. But I mean, he slams it into neutral. Thank God. It could have been horrible. I mean, you think about that, and it ends up breaking the drive shaft of the lower unit, which is no good, and ends up blowing up the engine, which is really no good. And I just remember feeling like a failure. And Skip took me, which if you knew Skip was a very tough man. He's a very tough man, right? And he expected a lot, but he pulled me in. He goes, hey, sometimes we mess up. He said, let me show you what you did wrong. And he comes in there and he says, these bleed lines, because you didn't route them the way they were supposed to. I was like, I know, but he goes, no, it's okay. You didn't know, but now you do. Let's not do that again.
As soon as you said powerhead, you lost me.
Yeah,
I'm just going to be honest.
Powerhead is the thing that creates the power.
Yeah, I can put 2 and 2 together there. I'm a bicycle guy. Like, I can fix a chain.
Yeah,
that's about it's the most mechanic I can get.
So I would love to tell you that's the only failure I've ever made. That's probably the most clear-cut failure. But I've made failures, in my personal life, where I had this moral high ground and thought I was so good, and then had failure, and then you have to deal with those situations, and then and when I say that, I'm not talking about like extreme moral failure. I hope everybody understands that, but I'm just talking about like areas where I thought I was right and I was clearly wrong, and then you have to go back and you have to apologize. And that's the one thing that I've tried to model in front of my children, and try to model in front of those people that I lead, is say, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that like I said that, or I shouldn't have said that when I said that.
Right.
Because I want them to know that, and I remember I had this one conversation with this, and where employee, he had really screwed up, and I was just frustrated, and I said to him, I said, no, I had told you to do this and you didn't do this. And we've had this conversation and such and such, and it went on and on. But the problem where I made the mistake, and I was pretty young in, I guess, as an employer at that time, is definitely immature. And I had said that in front of one of his peers. And I came back and I, openly, I said, I want all of you that were here to know I was wrong. I should not have said that. I should not have openly corrected you like that. It was in a moment. We were, it was hot, it was heated, as in like, it was very intense at that moment. And, I was very upset with you, but I should not have done that. I disrespected you and I should not have done that. But I meant what I said.
Well, it goes back to that praise in public, discipline in private
100%
kind of thing. And I think as leaders, we're constantly learning from our mistakes. I mean, one of my favorite authors of all time, his name is Ryan Leake. He says it's always difficult till it's done.
Yeah.
Right. And so like how many times did Thomas Edison try to discover electricity? Like 10,000 times before he got it.
And what he say? He goes, I know all the ways that it doesn't work,
right?
Whatever the case was.
And so that's so true. Just even whether it's relationships, whether it be leading, and so I'm curious. Let's go into a completely different direction than powerheads. Is that what you said? Powerheads, right. Or the church. What made you get on the library board?
So here's the. Blessed are the peacemakers, right? That's what Scripture tells us. I can be very confrontational. That's not an issue. My father and my mother, both of them, they didn't shy away from confrontation. I could tell you a wild story one time as a child on that particular thing. Good story, but they didn't shy away from confrontation. So, but I also believe that you go into confrontation with the intention to bring peace, right? We're not just going to go in here and throw in a verbal hand grenade and just watch it blow up, right? I want to go in and get some kind of resolution. And so what I saw at the time was, first of all, I had friends that work in the library system, church members, but also friends. Eric Head, another old Homosassa guy, just a good guy, great guy, smart, and I had saw where, there was a particular group that was coming in and for all intents and purposes, they had some certain things that were absolutely legitimate, like things that they were saying that like to a father or to a family that made sense. Like, I get that. Where I was kind of, as I saw this thing getting to where it was like a boiling point to where we potentially were going to lose our class, our who we are as a community trying to achieve the right thing. There's never a, there's never a right way to do a wrong thing, but there is certainly a wrong way to do a right thing.
Yeah.
And so, I wanted to go in there and kind of be more of a, I guess you would say like a conversation behind the door, behind closed doors that was like, hey guys, and just meet with everybody. And I've said this I was like, I will meet with anyone, whether we agree or not. I will meet, sit down and have a meeting, right? And so just sit down with them all and on both sides of them and just talk and say, okay, but can't we come to an agreement here? And I remember my first meeting in there was I was nominated, my first meeting nominated as chair, and I actually declined it because I'm like, no. I'm like, look, I first of all, I'm very grateful for the faith you have in me. I'm honored, However, I just got here. I'd like to have,
a feeling
of what I'm doing here before we get that. And then a year in, I was nominated chair and accepted, and vice chair is Edith, which Edith is very bright. She's a longtime librarian for CF, and she's very similar political views as me. She's super conservative and so on, but she kind of brings in these other like ways that make sense how you get into it. And her and I were in Leadership Citrus together and so on. And so Edith came in and as vice chair and then I as chair. And I really feel like, and I could be wrong, people from the outside could be looking in and they have a total different perception of what my perception is of the library board right now. Sorry, that thing's crooked.
Is that messing with you?
It a little bit, the OCD stuff. But anyways, they could have a different perception, and that's okay. But I feel like we've got a little bit of wind in our sails. Like, we've made some changes that needed to be made. But
some positive changes.
But we've also kind of calmed down a little bit of it. I think that, hey, look, we hear you. Okay, we hear you. We understand where you're coming from. But let's try to work behind the scenes on this. Because here's I'm sorry. The people that are affected the most we're in the community, and we're all taxpayers, right? And the library services us and so on. But the people that are affected the most about this are the people that are there every day having to implement all of these different policies that we're recommending for. So, like, why wouldn't we have them at the table? The library staff and the library directors and all that, and say, okay, here's what we want to achieve. But how do we get there without hurting you? And what I mean by hurting you, I don't care necessarily about your feelings, but hurting what you do on a regular basis. Right. I don't want to cause you more work than what's necessary. I don't want you to have to be scrambling around trying to figure out how you're going to pay for this. That's not what I'm interested in. I don't want that. How do we help you get to a place to where some of these needs are being answered? And, Director Chang has been always an ear open to listen. And, that's what I've tried to tell people is like, listen, why don't you just call him up or email him, send him an email, talk to him. This guy listens, and Eric, same thing, and actually, one of the recent things that we did that I think is such a great idea is there's been an issue over like with, children having access to some books that are not necessarily child appropriate, right? And so they're in the young adult section, which one of the things that was recommended was reclassifying the young adult section. So the library came back and they said, okay, we're going to move it from 15 to 18 is the young adult section. Sure. Before it was 12 to 18. So that kind of a no-brainer. And they did that. They're doing a good job there. But in addition was, Edith brought up this idea. We kind of had this issue of like, okay, well, how do we help prevent children from grabbing it and going from there, right? Well, Edith brings up this idea of, a card that's specifically for kids or restrictions. Well, library comes back, Director Chang, he says, here you go. He says, I've come up with this child restricted access card for children. And we're going to implement it by the end of the year. And so it's just like a great idea where parents can go and, okay, it's voluntarily. So if I'm a parent who doesn't necessarily want to restrict what my children reads, I just give them an adult card, and that's fine. But if I'm a parent like myself who wants to have control over what they're accessing, they have this restricted access card where they can only check out from the children's section. So those kind of things, just let's go with a common sense approach. So my original goal was to try to bring some kind of civility back, but also just let's work on this as a team. There are certain things that we all can agree on that need to be made, changes that need to be made. How can we make these changes in such a way that it doesn't hurt the library staff and so on? So
it's interesting you say that. Two things. I'm going to say two things, and then we're going to get into a rapid fire. Mm-hmm. And you can't think about the answer, and it's got to be 1 or 2 word answers.
Oh boy!
So,
are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah. It's pretty simple, like sweet tea versus unsweet tea. It's nothing. It's nothing major. Two things. You talk about as a library board, you're making decisions that you got to make sure, obviously, takes care of the community, but you're more worried about, or you're equally as worried about the staff. Above my head, for those that aren't, you can't see it because you just can't see it. But above my head is a picture of our work family. In every decision I make, I know I have to make sure I know it's going to affect all 50 employees.
100%.
I don't worry about 4 or 5. I don't worry about one department. It's all 50. And I got to make sure that all 50 are all moving in the same direction. And the efficiency in which we're serving the citizens of Citrus County is important. So that when you said that, my brain immediately went to the picture above my head, because that's one of the prominent pictures in my office, in both offices. And it's prominent up front in our front lobby, because we have to make sure we're making the decisions that are right for our employees. So important. It's why I come to work every day, right? It's the citizens of Citrus County, but it's the 50 employees.
100%.
You know, and then on another note, above your head, I think what's interesting, above Justin's head, is one of my favorite speeches of all time, by Theodore Roosevelt, called "The Man in the Arena."
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is you grew up in Homosassa, and I'm not downplaying anything about your knowledge or anything, but you grew up in Homosassa. You were a master boat mechanic. You're an amazing pastor, and you felt like there was a need, in this particular area, the library board, which isn't pretty by any means. It's very hard. There's no glam, there's nothing pretty, but it needed leadership, and it needed your leadership. And I can tell you, as a citizen, as a community leader, and activist, whatever you want to put there, I respect the heck out of you, because you got in the arena, and you fought in an arena that not a lot of people probably wanted to at that time. And that's very, I'm grateful for you on that. That's why I love you. I think one of the biggest things we can find is in mentors. Everybody wants to go out and find these mentors that they don't even know. And how are you going to trust somebody you don't even know to be a mentor if you don't even know them or don't have a relationship with them?
Right.
That is transactional, I would believe. But I think with being friends with a guy like you, Justin, I think for me, and I know we've only known each other for a brief time, 4 or 5 years now, very transformational. Like, even in our friendship, I've been able to be transformed by our friendship. And I think what's cool about our friendship specifically is, man, you're super busy. I'm super busy. We could go 2 months without talking, but we can pick up like it was yesterday.
Yeah, right.
And that's super cool. And I think one of the things that I love about you also is, you're 6th generation Citrus County, and I'm going to be the only generation of Craig Dalton and the Dalton family in Citrus. But you as a community has accepted me, and that's why I wanted to go into Homosassa and meet your people. You know, and so that was very awesome. And I could speak to you for hours. We don't have hours. Most people, they probably already tuned out. Maybe I don't even know. So now we're gonna get into rapid fire, and then we're gonna land this plane, buddy. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
I don't want you thinking about this. Don't overthink this. Maybe you should turn your. You ever watch that movie Over the Top? No, wait. Is that the name of the movie where it's an arm wrestling movie, and the guy turns his hat around and he's like, "All right, I'm ready." I can't remember the name. I'm not a movie guy, but that's what I feel like you should do. I feel like you should turn your Crystal River Church of God hat around.
Okay.
All right, we ready?
Here we go.
We ready for this?
Yeah.
Sweet tea or unsweet tea?
So, funny story. I like them both.
You remember?
Mixed.
It was only supposed to be one word. You've already messed this up.
I know.
You already messed this up, Homosassa. Maybe you should turn the hat back around. All right, you like them both? Like mixed? Together. Not like an Arnold Palmer where you have sweet tea and lemonade.
McDonald's calls it half cut.
A half cut?
Half cut.
I've learned something new today. Did you know that it was Citrus County's birthday the other day? June 2nd.
Wow.
1887. 1887 it was formed. That was a fun fact. Because you just taught me a half cut.
Yeah.
Half cut, uncut? What's it called?
Half cut.
Half cut. Okay. I'm just a sweet tea guy. Don't give me unsweet tea.
Yeah.
You've just messed up drinks.
You like it where you can pour it on your pancakes if you run out of syrup, kind of thing?
I don't do that.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't do that. Yeah. Maybe hot honey.
I tried it. I've done my very best to try to cut the sugar out.
You're too sweet.
Well, dude, I grew up with it. Sweet.
Sweet.
Right. But
like Sunny Sweet.
Big time. Yeah. All right.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke all day.
Not faith-based, and I'm only asking this for leadership purposes, or maybe it could be. I like Greg Croshaw. What is your favorite podcast you listen to? Not named the CCPA Playbook.
Sean Ryan.
Who's he? I don't know if I know.
Former Navy SEAL.
Oh.
Yeah.
We like those guys.
Yeah.
We like those guys.
He's good.
Yeah, we like those dudes. So those dudes are pretty cool. Make your bed in the morning, or you leave it just a hot mess?
Well, my wife's a stay-at-home mom, so
she makes it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Adam McCraven, one of my favorite books, Navy SEAL. Yeah. He's a Navy SEAL. He one of my favorite books is Make Your Bed, and he talks about if you're going to accomplish something every day, start out by making your bed. Super awesome.
I call it Eat the Frog.
Eat the frog.
Eat the frog first thing. Do the hard thing first.
Oh, I don't know if I've ever put the frog in connection with that. That's very interesting. I'm watching the NBA finals last night, and they start talking about an OKC player, Oklahoma City player. I can't remember the player's name. I think it was Williams, and he grew up in a military family.
Okay.
And so this young man goes to school. He's in elementary school, rides the bus, gets on the bus. I guess mom finds out that he hadn't made his bed. And mom goes to school, checks him out of school, takes him back home, makes him make the bed, and then takes him back to school.
That's good. Baby.
That's impressive. I will say my daughter wasn't the greatest at it growing up. But we went and picked her up. Nancy and I went and picked her up for lunch yesterday. And I'll be darned if that bed wasn't made, buddy. I was very impressed.
That's awesome.
I was very happy. I'm like, maybe it sinks in eventually.
Yeah.
But that's super awesome. You grew up in Homosassa, so I'm curious about this one. Are beach guy or mountain guy?
Whew. Yeah, I got to pick one. Definitely beach if I had to choose between the two. Yeah, I love the water.
Yeah. I think my answer to that, I asked that question a couple weeks ago. I was just at the beach this weekend. Man, I can go stay in the mountains this weekend. Yeah. I'm good either way.
I'm with you. But you told me I could only pick one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I know. That was complicated. That was tricky. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Oh, definitely early.
What is your early?
So early.
Let's see if you can beat the gentleman that Derek Bittner answered this question last week. He's an early bird too. And I'm curious what time you get up.
No, I'm 6 o'clock. 6 a.m.
He's 4 a.m.
I mean, when I preach, like on a Sunday, 4 a.m. Yeah, just because I feel like, I got to do some extra preparation kind of thing,
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely 4 a.m. when I preach, but 6 a.m. is my deal. It's my jam.
6 a.m. Yeah. Alarm or no alarm? Or are your kids the alarm?
No. No, my daughter is the only early riser out of the three. But no, I set an alarm, but I barely ever
make it. I had an amazing dog for 12 years. His name was Max. He was a Springer Spaniel.
Yeah.
Sun's up, he's up. Yeah. So he was always up at like 5 a.m. It doesn't matter. It did not matter if he was 1 year old or 12 years old.
Yeah.
And he passed away a couple years ago. And that dog lives in me forever because I'm up at 5 a.m. Nothing changes it. I don't need an alarm. It doesn't matter.
I have a cane Corso that she'll walk up, my hand to be over on the edge of the bed or whatever, just like, and she'll walk up and push me like that's, hey, wake up, I'm hungry.
It's time.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's better than the kids doing it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Justin, man, I appreciate you coming here. You are one of my most favorite people of all time. Like I said, you are the most American people I know. And I love it, man. That's what I love about you. Oh, this is it. Maybe I could get Megan to hand me this. What is your spirit animal?
Whoa, spirit.
Yeah. Do you have a spirit animal?
Man, what would be my spirit animal?
So this was mine.
A unicorn.
It's a patriotic unicorn.
Okay,
though.
Yeah, not.
I mean, if you're going to be a unicorn, be a patriotic one.
Right.
So it's funny because I really genuinely believe that you're the most American person I know. One of them. But this guy is my jam. That's me. A staff member got this for me because they know I like being unapologetically me.
Yeah.
And I love America better than I just love America. And so especially since we're coming up on 4th of July, they are like, this is perfect for you. So it's usually sitting there.
Yeah, I would say so it's just and probably the ox, just grind.
I almost thought you were going to say otter. So ox, we'll go with the ox. That's an ox.
Yeah, just grind it out. Share the load and grind it out.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you hear about our Lou passing away? I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't want to end on a bad note, but I did hear about that this morning.
Yeah, I shared it on Facebook. That
Homosassa.
Oh yeah, poor guy. I mean, listen.
She was old, right?
Yeah, I want to say I know the oldest in captivity.
Yeah,
like ever known. So I mean, I hate it. And obviously there'll never be another hippo there because that was a special thing. And he was growing up, that's all I knew. But maybe the river clean up better.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
So you're an ox, and I'm a unicorn.
That's interesting.
We're gonna go into this week. You're gonna carry the load, and I'm gonna be a unicorn.
Yep.
With some beach sand, though. I got beach sand.
That's right.
Be awesome. The imperfect shell. That's what we like.
Yeah, the imperfect shell.
That's what we like.
I think I got that nailed.
That was pretty awesome. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. I've got that nailed as well. Yeah. Well, Justin, I appreciate you coming on. And I hope everybody shares our YouTube, shares our post, listens on Apple, Spotify, all the different podcast formats you can listen to your favorite podcast on. Leave us a review. We're going to be growing this. We really hope that this is transformational. We hope that this is relational. We hope that you get to know a lot of our community members, our community leaders, and you learn more about the Property Appraiser's Office and the history of Citrus County. So thank you. Be a friend, say something nice, change someone's life. Hope you have a great day.